My name is Eliana, and I'm 42 years old. I never imagined that at my age I would be living in a nursing home. Most people think of women in their 70s or 80s when they hear that word. But life doesn't always follow the path we plan. Until a few years ago, I was an independent woman, strong and capable. I worked as a paralegal at a busy law firm in Chicago, and although the hours were long and the stress was heavy, I found purpose in my work. More than that, I found purpose in raising my son, Lucas. He was my entire world. From the moment I first held him in my arms, I promised myself I would give him a life better than the one I had growing up. I worked 2 jobs to make sure Lucas had everything: private schooling, extracurricular activities, summer camps, and later, tuition for college. Every cent I earned, every sacrifice I made, was for him, and I didn't regret it. Watching him grow, watching his smile light up when he got his first baseball glove, or when I surprised him with a new laptop for his studies, it made every sleepless night worth it. But my life changed the day of the accident. It was a rainy morning, and I was on my way to work when a car ran a red light and hit me head-on. The impact left me with severe injuries, and although I survived, my body never fully recovered. I lost much of my mobility, and despite months of painful therapy, I couldn't live on my own anymore. That's when my doctor recommended I move into a nursing facility, not because of my age, but because I needed daily care. At first, I resisted. I thought, I'm only 42, I shouldn't be here. But when I looked around at my empty apartment, I realized I had no choice. Lucas was away at graduate school, and I didn't want to burden him. I told myself it would only be temporary, just until I regained more independence. When I first moved in, I held on to one comforting belief. Lucas would visit me often. After all, I had given everything to him. He and I had always been close. I could still remember the times when he was a little boy, climbing into my bed after a nightmare, whispering that he never wanted me to leave him. We had shared a bond I thought nothing could break, so I waited. On the first weekend after moving in, I sat by the window in the common room, watching the clock, excited for his arrival. I imagined us sitting together, maybe going outside to the garden, catching up on his classes, and laughing the way we used to. But the hours passed, and Lucas never came. He called later that night with an apology, saying he had been swamped with assignments. I believed him. He was ambitious, chasing big dreams, and I told myself not to worry. He promised he'd come the following weekend. That weekend came and went, and again, he didn't show. He sent another excuse, this time about a study group. I told myself he was just adjusting to the demands of adulthood. That once he found balance, he'd make more time for me. But weeks turned into months. And still, he never walked through those doors. Every time I dialed his number, he sounded hurried, almost irritated. He'd tell me he was busy, that he'd call me back, but sometimes days went by before I heard from him again. His words were full of reassurance. I love you, Mom, I'll visit soon, but his actions told me otherwise. Meanwhile, I watched other residents in the facility receive visits from their children, grandchildren, siblings, and friends. The halls were often filled with laughter, the smell of fresh flowers, the joy of reunions. And then there was me sitting alone, pretending to read a book while secretly watching the door, hoping Lucas would surprise me. I started keeping a journal, a place where I poured all the feelings I didn't dare say out loud. Loneliness. Disappointment. A quiet ache that never seemed to go away. In those pages, I admitted something that I was too ashamed to speak. I felt forgotten by my own child. It's a strange kind of heartbreak. The kind that comes not from strangers or lovers, but from your own flesh and blood. I kept asking myself, did I do something wrong? Did I fail him as a mother? I thought back to all the nights I stayed up late helping him with homework, all the weekends I worked double shifts to buy him the things he wanted, all the dreams I gave up just so he could have his. And now, when I needed him most, he wasn't here. The truth began to settle in, heavy and sharp. I had become invisible to the one person I thought I could count on forever. But I had no idea his rejection would force me to rewrite the future in a way no one expected. The first time Lucas didn't show up, I thought it was just a misunderstanding. When Lucas promised to visit me the weekend after his first missed call, I clung to that hope like it was a lifeline. I told the staff in the dining hall, "My son's coming today. We'll probably eat lunch together." They smiled warmly, and even saved us a nice table by the window. I wore my best sweater, brushed my hair carefully, and dabbed on the faintest bit of perfume, wanting to look my best for him. But the hours slipped by. Noon turned into 3 o'clock. The soup grew cold on the tray, untouched. Every time the doors opened, my heart leapt, only to sink again when it was someone else's family walking through. By evening, I had convinced myself something must have happened. Maybe his car broke down, maybe he lost track of time. That night, the phone rang. His voice was rushed, casual, almost careless. "Sorry, Mom, something came up with my friends. I'll see you next weekend, I promise." I told him it was okay, that I understood. But after we hung up, I stared at the phone in my lap, feeling a hollowness I couldn't quite put into words. The next weekend arrived, and again I waited. I tried not to get too excited this time, but deep down I still believed he would walk through those doors. When he didn't, he texted late that night. "Busy again. School's crazy. Love you, Mom." I reread those 3 words, "Love you, Mom," over and over. They felt like scraps tossed at me to keep me quiet. Still, I made excuses for him. "He's young," I told myself. "He's adjusting. He's just overwhelmed right now." But weeks bled into months. My calls went unanswered more often than not. When he did pick up, there was a sharpness in his tone. "Mom, I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of something." I always said the same thing. "All right, sweetheart. Call me when you can." Sometimes he did. Sometimes he didn't. Inside, I was unraveling. I began to notice the small rituals of the other residents. Mrs. Turner, in the room down the hall, had her daughter visit every Wednesday afternoon like clockwork. They would sit together, laughing so loudly you could hear it down the corridor. Mr. Benson's grandchildren brought him homemade cookies on Sundays, and he'd pass them out to the nurses, pride shining in his eyes. And me? I sat by the window, pretending to read while my gaze drifted toward the parking lot. I learned to recognize the sounds of certain car engines, holding my breath each time a vehicle pulled in, praying it was Lucas. But it never was. The nurses noticed too. One of them, Sarah, gently asked me one day, "Do you want me to call your son for you?" I smiled politely and said, "No, he's just busy." But the truth was, I didn't want her to hear the indifference in his voice. I didn't want anyone else to know how unwanted I had become. I started journaling more seriously then. At first, I wrote about daily events, the weather, the meals, the activities the staff arranged. But slowly, my entries became confessions. I wrote about the shame of sitting alone during family visiting hours, about the ache in my chest when I heard the word "mom" from someone else's mouth. Some nights, I stayed awake replaying our past. I remembered Lucas as a little boy, clutching my hand tightly on his first day of kindergarten, refusing to let go until the teacher coaxed him inside. I remembered the time he scraped his knee and sobbed until I carried him in my arms, whispering that I'd never let anything hurt him. I remembered every birthday, every Christmas, every sacrifice I made to ensure his happiness. So why was I so easy to forget now? The worst part wasn't the loneliness, it was the humiliation. I had told the staff so proudly when I first moved in that my son would visit often. I believed it myself. But as the weeks went on, I could see pity in their eyes when they glanced my way, as if they silently wondered, why doesn't her son come? One evening, I overheard 2 residents whispering in the lounge. They didn't mean to be cruel, but I caught the words anyway. "She's too young to be here. Poor thing, her son never even comes." I went back to my room and cried harder than I had since the accident. Still, I refused to give up hope. I told myself things would change, that Lucas would realize how much I needed him. I imagined him showing up with flowers, with that sheepish smile he used to give me as a boy, saying, "Sorry, Mom. I've been awful. I'm here now." But that day never came. Instead, his distance grew sharper. His phone calls became shorter, more perfunctory. Once, when I asked if he could visit for my birthday, he sighed heavily on the line. "Mom, you don't understand how busy I am. You're being unfair. I can't just drop everything." Unfair. That word sliced through me. Hadn't I dropped everything for him his entire life? The loneliness became a dull, constant ache. I tried to hide it during the day, smiling when nurses came in, making small talk with other residents. But at night, when the halls grew quiet and the lights dimmed, the weight of abandonment pressed down on me. I prayed sometimes, asking God why I had been given a son who no longer wanted me. I asked for strength, for comfort, for some kind of sign that my life still mattered. And then, unexpectedly, that sign appeared. And it was in my lowest moment of despair that a stranger would step into my life. Her name was Tessa, and she lived in the apartment building next to my nursing home before fate brought us together. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that feels like it will pass without leaving a trace. I was sitting in the courtyard, bundled in a shawl, staring at the roses that lined the garden beds. The staff kept them well tended, but I couldn't help remembering the days when I had a garden of my own hands deep in soil, the smell of fresh earth, the satisfaction of coaxing life out of the ground. Gardening had always been my escape, my therapy. Now it was something I could only look at, not touch. I must have been lost in thought, because I didn't notice her at first. She came walking through the gate with a tote bag slung over her shoulder, a warm smile on her face. She wasn't staff, I could tell by her casual jeans and soft sweater. She had a kind of glow about her. Not in appearance exactly, but in presence, the way some people just radiate warmth. She stopped near me and said, "Hi, I hope I'm not intruding. I come here sometimes to help out." Her voice was gentle, genuine. I introduced myself, and she said, "I'm Tessa. I live in the building across the street. I volunteer here on my days off." That word volunteer stuck with me. She wasn't paid to be here. She chose to be. At first, our conversation was light. She asked if I enjoyed the garden, and I admitted it was my favorite spot in the whole facility. That led me to sharing that I used to have a rose garden at home. Her eyes lit up. "Really? My mom used to love roses. She'd spend hours outside with them." She paused then, her expression softening. "She passed away when I was 12. I guess I've always felt like I missed out on having that kind of connection with her." There was a quiet ache in her voice, but also an openness. It was rare, most people avoided heavy topics with strangers, but not Tessa. She didn't shy away from emotion. Something inside me stirred. I hadn't expected to feel a bond forming in such a simple conversation. From that day on, Tessa started coming by more often. Sometimes she'd sit with me in the courtyard, other times she'd join me in the lounge. She always brought something small, a book she thought I'd like, cookies she baked, or even just funny stories about her coworkers. She had this way of making the hours slip by, turning what used to feel like endless stretches of loneliness into moments filled with laughter and light. The staff noticed it too. One nurse teased me gently, saying, "Looks like you've got a new best friend, Eliana." And I couldn't deny it. One afternoon, I found myself telling her things I hadn't told anyone else. I told her about Lucas, how close we once were, how I thought he would visit but he never did. I braced myself for pity, but she didn't look at me that way. Instead, she said, "I'm so sorry. You don't deserve that. You've clearly given him everything." Her words didn't fix the wound, but they soothed it, like a balm on raw skin. Over time, our conversations grew deeper. She told me about her childhood, how hard it had been without a mother, how she always wished she had someone to lean on for advice and comfort. She laughed as she admitted, "I've always envied people who could call their mom for recipes or just to talk about their day." I looked at her then, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't pain or bitterness, it was purpose. One weekend, she brought her younger sister Callie with her. Callie was 25, bubbly and energetic, a whirlwind of jokes and light-hearted chatter. She instantly pulled me into her circle, as if I had always belonged there. That day, sitting with the two of them, I laughed harder than I had in years. It struck me that I wasn't just enjoying their company, I was starting to feel like I was part of something again. A family, even if it wasn't bound by blood. And yet, part of me felt guilty. Was I betraying Lucas by letting these strangers fill the space he had abandoned? Was I trying to replace him? But then I reminded myself, how can you replace someone who isn't there? How can you betray someone who has already turned their back on you? One night, after Tessa left, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I felt alive again. Today, I remembered what it felt like to matter." As weeks passed, Tessa became a fixture in my life. She didn't just visit, she cared. She asked how I was really feeling, not just out of politeness, but because she wanted to know. She celebrated small milestones with me, like when I managed to walk a little further in physical therapy. She treated me not as a patient or an obligation, but as a person. And in return, I found myself looking forward to her visits in a way that both comforted and scared me. Comforted, because I no longer felt invisible. Scared, because I knew what it was like to depend on someone and then be left behind. One evening, she hugged me goodbye and whispered, "You remind me of the mom I always wished I had." Tears filled my eyes as I realized what she was giving me wasn't just companionship, it was something deeper. She was offering me a place in her heart, and she was taking one in mine. For the first time in months, I didn't dread the silence of my room after someone left. Instead, I lay in bed smiling, holding on to the warmth of her words. But I didn't realize how much my growing attachment to Tessa would complicate everything with Lucas. The day I finally confronted Lucas was the day I learned the cold truth. I had been carrying the weight of Lucas's absence like a stone in my chest. For months, I convinced myself he was just busy, that life would eventually slow down and he'd make time for me. But deep down, I knew something was broken between us. And it was breaking me. One Friday afternoon, after yet another lonely week, I picked up the phone and called him. My voice trembled when he answered. "Lucas, sweetheart," I said. "Please. Can you come see me? Just for a little while. I don't need much, just an hour." There was silence on the line, followed by a heavy sigh. "Fine, Mom, I'll come tomorrow." My heart leapt. Tomorrow. At last I would see him. The next day, I sat in the lounge, nerves buzzing like electricity. I wore the blue blouse he had once told me was his favorite. I kept glancing at the clock, afraid he might change his mind. When he finally walked through the doors, I nearly cried from relief. But something felt wrong immediately. He didn't rush toward me with open arms. He didn't smile the way he used to when he saw me waiting. Instead, he walked in with his phone in hand, glancing around as if he wanted to be anywhere else. He gave me a quick peck on the cheek and sat down heavily across from me. "Hey," he muttered, barely looking up. I tried to bridge the distance. I asked about his classes, his friends, his life. He gave me short, clipped answers, his eyes darting back to his phone screen. Every time I tried to engage him, he seemed more impatient. Finally, I reached out and placed my hand over his. "Lucas, I miss you. Why don't you come see me anymore?" He froze, then pulled his hand back, as though my touch burned him. "Mom, you don't get it," he said. "I have my own life now. I can't waste it sitting here." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Waste it? Spending time with me was a waste? My voice cracked as I whispered, "I'm not asking for much. Just a little time with you. I'm still your mother." He looked at me then, his eyes cold, his jaw tight. "Yeah, and? I'm not a kid anymore. I can't be running over here every weekend like you expect me to. I've got responsibilities. I've got things to do." Tears stung my eyes, but I fought to keep my composure. "I'm not asking for every weekend, Lucas. Just, don't forget me. That's all I want." But then he said something that cut deeper than everything else. "Look, Mom, you're taken care of here. You've got nurses, food, a roof over your head. You're fine. When the time comes, I'll be there for the important stuff. You know, the will, the house, your things." That's what matters. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Did he just say what I thought he said? The will? I asked quietly. He shrugged, as if it was obvious. Yeah. I mean, that's part of why I need to focus on my future, right? I can't keep running back and forth here when I know you've already set me up for later. I need to think about me now. It was like a knife twisting in my heart. All those years I spent sacrificing, working myself to exhaustion, dreaming that my son would carry my love with him, only to realize that in his mind, my greatest value was what I could leave behind when I was gone. I stared at him, my hands trembling. Lucas, is that all I am to you? An inheritance? He frowned, defensive. Don't twist my words. Of course you're my mom. Of course I love you. But let's be real. You're in here now, and I'm out there building my life. You can't expect me to just… What? Put everything on hold for you? My heart shattered. He didn't see me as his mother anymore. Not the woman who carried him, who gave him everything, who held him through nightmares and cheered at his graduations. He saw me as a burden, a responsibility, a future payout. I swallowed hard, forcing back the sobs that threatened to break free. Lucas, I never wanted to be a burden. I just wanted to know that you cared, that I still mattered to you. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly eager to leave. Mom, I do care. You're just making this bigger than it island. Look, I've got an appointment. I'll call you later, okay? Before I could respond, he stood up. He gave me a quick, perfunctory hug, his arms stiff around me, then pulled away. Without looking back, he walked out the door. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair where he had been. The world around me blurred the chatter of other families, the clinking of dishes, the distant sound of the television in the lounge. All I could hear were his words echoing in my mind. When the time comes, the will, the house, your things, that's what matters. When the time comes, not now, not me, not love, just things. Tears streamed down my face. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly betrayed by the very person I had trusted most. A nurse came over and gently asked if I was all right. I forced a smile and nodded. But inside, I was broken. That night, alone in my room, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I lost my son." Not in the way a parent fears when they imagine tragedy, but in a different way. I lost him to selfishness, to greed, to indifference. And I don't know if I'll ever get him back. It was then, in the silence of that lonely room, that a seed of resolve began to take root. If Lucas saw me only as a source of inheritance, then maybe it was time to show him that love cannot be bought, sold, or taken for granted. And in that moment, I knew I had to make a choice that would change everything. Tessa became my lifeline when my own son turned his back on me. After Lucas's visit, something inside me broke. I had clung to the belief that he still loved me the way he once had. That his absence was about being busy, not about being unwilling, but his words had revealed the truth. I was no longer his priority. His love had turned into something transactional, tied to what I could give him when I was gone, not what I meant to him while I was alive. I spent days afterward in a fog of grief. Meals lost their taste. The chatter of the other residents only made my loneliness feel sharper. For the first time, I felt the depth of what abandonment truly meant. And then, like sunlight breaking through a storm, there was Tessa. She arrived one afternoon with a paper bag full of pastries, her smile as bright as ever. "I brought almond croissants," she said, holding the bag like it was a treasure. "They reminded me of you for some reason." I forced a smile. But she noticed the shadows in my expression immediately. She always did. She sat down across from me, leaning forward with genuine concern. "Ellie, what's wrong? Something happened." Her words opened the floodgates. I told her everything: how Lucas had finally visited, how cold and distant he had been, how he had all but admitted he only cared about what I would leave him behind in death. Saying it out loud was like tearing open a wound, but Tessa didn't flinch. She reached across the table, took my hand, and squeezed it gently. "Eliana," she said softly, "you don't deserve that. You've given him your life, and he doesn't even see it. But you're not alone, you have people who care about you." Her words carried a weight I hadn't realized I needed to hear. From then on, Tessa became more than just a visitor, she became my anchor. She visited almost every day after work, sometimes staying late into the evening. She brought me books she thought I'd enjoy, little crafts we could do together, and even snacks to replace the bland cafeteria meals. We developed our own rituals. Friday nights became movie nights, where we'd sit in the lounge with popcorn and watch old classics. Sundays were story days, when she'd tell me about her week, the good, the bad, and the funny mishaps at her job. Her presence filled the hollow spaces Lucas had left behind. And then one weekend, she brought her younger sister, Callie. Callie was 25, a whirlwind of energy and laughter. Where Tessa was calm and nurturing, Callie was spirited and quick-witted. She burst into my room with a bag of board games and declared, "I hope you're ready to get your butt kicked at Scrabble." The three of us spent hours together, laughing until tears rolled down our cheeks. It had been so long since I had laughed like that. So long since I felt part of something larger than myself. Over the weeks, Callie became a regular presence too. Sometimes she and Tessa would come together, sometimes separately. They'd bring me into their sisterly banter, telling stories from their childhood, joking about each other's quirks. Slowly, without realizing it, I began to feel like I was slipping into a role I hadn't expected to play. Not a patient, not a lonely forgotten woman, but a mother figure. One evening, after we had played cards for hours, Callie kissed me on the cheek and said, "You know, you're kind of like our bonus mom now." The words hit me straight in the heart. When they left that night, I sat on my bed and whispered to myself, maybe family isn't about blood after all. The staff noticed the change in me. Sarah, the nurse who often checked on me, smiled one afternoon and said, "You're glowing these days, Eliana. That young woman who visits you, she's good for you." And she was. More than she even realized. Tessa and I began sharing deeper conversations. I told her about my childhood, about growing up poor, about the dreams I once had before life pulled me in different directions. She listened without judgment, nodding, encouraging me to share more. And in turn, she shared her own struggles, how she had spent much of her life searching for a place to belong. How losing her mother so young left her with a hole she never thought she'd fill. One evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, over the courtyard, she said softly, "Ellie, I feel like you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. You feel like family to me." Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't the bitter tears of loneliness I had cried for so long. They were tears of gratitude, of joy, of relief. That night in my journal I wrote, "Today I realize that love doesn't end when blood ties are broken. Sometimes, love finds its way to you in unexpected places. Through people who choose you, not because they have to, but because they want to." The holidays were approaching, and I dreaded them at first. The thought of sitting alone in my room while other residents celebrated with their families felt unbearable, but Tessa refused to let that happen. "Christmas Eve is at our place," she announced one day. "We're bringing you home with us, no arguments." And so, for the first time since entering the nursing home, I spent Christmas in a real home, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and love. Tessa and Callie had decorated the apartment with twinkling lights and a small tree covered in ornaments. They cooked a simple but delicious dinner, and after we ate, they surprised me with a gift, a framed picture of the three of us, taken during one of our game nights. I cried as I held it in my hands. "You girls have no idea what this means to me," I whispered. Tessa hugged me tightly. "We do, Ellie. That's why we wanted you to have it." In that moment, surrounded by the sisters who had become my chosen family, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. But deep in the back of my mind, I knew that the stronger my bond with Tessa grew, the more complicated things would become with Lucas. He had already resented her presence once. What would he say if he knew just how much she meant to me now? But what Tessa didn't know was that I had begun planning something that would shake Lucas to his core. It was a quiet afternoon when I asked to meet with my lawyer. The decision had been building inside me for weeks, though I hadn't dared to say it out loud. Every time I looked at Tessa and Callie, these young women who had chosen me, who showed up for me without obligation, I felt a warmth I hadn't known in so long. And every time I thought about Lucas's cold words, his indifference, and the way he had reduced my worth to an inheritance, I felt a crushing ache. I loved my son. Nothing could erase that. But love is not the same as trust. Love does not erase betrayal. So one afternoon, I asked the nurse if she could arrange transportation for me. I said I needed to meet with my lawyer, a man named Mr. Gallagher who had handled my affairs for years. She didn't ask questions, just made the arrangements and wheeled me into the van that took me downtown. The city felt foreign after so much time inside the walls of the facility. The noise, the bustle, the hurried people rushing down sidewalks, it all seemed like another world. A life I had left behind. When I arrived at Mr. Gallagher's office, he greeted me warmly. He was an older man, gray-haired, with kind eyes that had seen 1,000 family disputes and heartbreaks. He helped me into his office, closed the door, and said gently, "Eliana, what brings you in today?" I hesitated for a long moment, staring at the polished wooden desk between us. My voice was quiet when I finally spoke. "I need to change my will." His eyebrows rose, but he nodded calmly. "All right, let's talk about what changes you want to make." I took a deep breath. "I want to remove my son as the sole beneficiary. And I want to leave my estate, my savings, my jewelry, my home to someone else." His pen stilled against his notepad. "To whom?" My lips trembled as I whispered, "To Tessa. A young woman who's been by my side when no one else was. She's not blood, but she's family to me in every way that matters." For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. Saying it out loud made it real. Mr. Gallagher didn't judge. He simply nodded and said, "You're within your rights to do that, but you understand, this may cause conflict later." I swallowed hard. I know. But Lucas has already made it clear that he sees me as nothing more than a will. If that's what matters to him, then I'll make sure my will speaks the truth. We spent hours going over details. I specified that Tessa would inherit my house, my savings account, and the heirlooms I had saved from my mother. I even wrote a small portion for Callie, because she too had become like a daughter to me. As for Lucas, I left him nothing but a letter. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was meant to be honest. In that letter, I explained that love is measured by actions, not words. That he had abandoned me when I needed him most. That inheritance is not a reward owed to blood, but a gift given to those who stand by your side. When I finished signing the documents, my hands shook. Mr. Gallagher slid the papers into a folder and locked them away. "It's done," he said quietly. I sat back in my chair, exhaling deeply. It was the strangest mix of emotions, grief, and relief intertwined. Grief that it had come to this, relief that I had taken control of my own story. On the ride back to the nursing home, I stared out the window at the passing streets. A mother is never supposed to feel this way, I thought. A mother is supposed to leave behind her legacy to her child, to pass on love and security. But what happens when the child throws that love away? What happens when blood ties rot with neglect? When I returned, Tessa was waiting for me in the lounge. She rushed over with her usual bright smile. "There you are!" I was worried. "Where'd you go today?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I had an appointment with my lawyer, just updating some things." She tilted her head curiously. "Everything okay?" Smiled softly, though inside my heart was heavy. "Everything's better than okay." I didn't tell her then. Not yet. I wanted the decision to remain mine until the time came. But looking at her, seeing the kindness in her eyes, the warmth in her smile, I knew without a doubt that I had made the right choice. That night, I sat in my bed with my journal open. My pen hovered above the page before I wrote, "Today, I chose love. Not blood. Not obligation, but love. For days afterward, I carried the secret quietly. Tessa continued visiting, unaware of the weight of what I had done. She made me laugh, made me feel alive again, while I tucked the knowledge close to my chest like a hidden treasure. But secrets like that have a way of surfacing, and deep in my bones, I knew it was only a matter of time before Lucas learned what I had done. But the secret of my will wouldn't stay hidden for long. Lucas's sudden visit weeks later made me realize he was growing suspicious. It had been almost 2 months since I changed my will. I hadn't breathed a word of it to anyone, not even Tessa, though the secret pulsed inside me like a living thing. I carried it carefully, knowing it had the power to destroy whatever fragile bond remained between my son and me. Then, out of nowhere, Lucas showed up one Saturday afternoon. The receptionist called to let me know he had signed in, and for a moment, my heart leapt with hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was here because he wanted to see me. Maybe he had thought about our last conversation and realized how deeply he had hurt me. But when he walked into the lounge, holding a bouquet of grocery store roses and forcing a smile, I saw right through him. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and calculating. "Hi, Mom," he said, pressing the flowers into my hands. "Thought I'd surprise you." It had been months since he last came, and now he wanted to act like a devoted son. I smiled faintly and thanked him, but my stomach knotted with unease. Something about his demeanor felt rehearsed, like he was playing a part. He sat across from me, leaning back in his chair with a casualness that didn't fool me. He asked about my health, about the nurses, about the food small talk, the kind of questions you ask when you don't really care about the answers. Then, gradually, his questions shifted. "So, have you met with Mr. Gallagher lately?" he asked, pretending to sound casual. I froze for just a moment, but forced my face to remain calm. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged. "I don't know, just curious." "I mean, you're not getting any younger, Mom. It's smart to make sure your affairs are in order, that's all." The words stung, but I swallowed them down. "Yes, Lucas, my affairs are in order. You don't have to worry about that." He studied me, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if he could read between the lines of what I wasn't saying. Then his gaze shifted to the doorway just as Tessa walked in. She carried a small bag of groceries and waved when she saw me, her face lighting up like it always did. Lucas's expression soured instantly. "Oh," he muttered. "She's here." Tessa approached with her usual warmth, setting the bag down on the table. "Hey, Ellie, I brought those crackers you like, and some magazines too." Her presence filled me with relief. But I could feel the tension radiating off Lucas. He crossed his arms, glaring at her as if she were an intruder. "Nice of you to make yourself at home here," he said coldly. Tessa blinked, taken aback. I come to see Eliana. She's become very important to me." His jaw tightened. "She's my mother, not yours." The air grew heavy. I looked between them, my heart pounding. Tessa opened her mouth to respond, but I quickly intervened. "Lucas, please. She's my friend. She visits because she cares." "Yeah. Well," he said bitterly. "It looks to me like she's replacing me." His words stabbed deeper than he realized. Replacing him? How could anyone replace what I had lost in him? No one could. But when someone walks out of your life willingly, can they really be replaced or are they already gone? Tessa stayed quiet, her eyes flicking to me, waiting for me to speak. So I did. My voice trembled, but I spoke firmly. "Lucas, she's not replacing you. But she's here. And you're not. She shows me love and kindness, and I won't apologize for letting her into my life." He leaned forward, his eyes flashing with anger. "You're letting strangers into your life and shutting out your own son. Do you know how that looks?" I stared at him, unable to stop the bitterness that rose in my throat. "Do you know how it looks that you never come to see me unless you want something?" His face hardened. He pushed his chair back and stood abruptly. "I don't need this. I came here to check on you and this is the thanks I get? Fine. But don't forget, Mom, family is family. And in the end, blood is what matters. Not some girl who decided to play the hero. Without another word, he stormed out, leaving behind the flowers he had brought, still wrapped in their cheap plastic. I sat there in silence, my hands trembling. Tessa reached over and touched my arm gently. "Ellie, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause tension." I shook my head. "No, Tessa, don't apologize. None of this is your fault. You've been here for me when he hasn't. That's the truth." But even as I said it, fear gnawed at me. Lucas had seen Tessa's presence, and it had shaken him. His questions about the lawyer, his sudden visit, it all pointed to one thing. He suspected. He knew something had changed. That night, alone in my room, I couldn't stop replaying his words. Family is family. Blood is what matters. I once believed that too. But blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Blood doesn't guarantee love. And blood doesn't guarantee respect. I wrote in my journal, "He's watching me now. He knows something isn't the same. And when he finds out the truth, there will be no turning back." And I knew it was only a matter of time before his true intentions came crashing down. As Lucas grew colder, my bond with Tessa grew stronger. After Lucas's visit, the air around me felt heavy, thick with the unspoken truth that he suspected something. His sudden questions about my lawyer, his bitterness toward Tessa, it all lingered in my mind. I knew the storm wasn't over. But at the same time, I couldn't deny what was happening in my heart. The more my son pulled away, the more Tessa drew me close. Tessa didn't know about the will. She had no idea the weight of the secret I was carrying. To her, our bond was simply what it appeared to be: a friendship, a connection, something good that had blossomed unexpectedly in both of our lives. But to me, it was more. She wasn't just filling the silence Lucas left behind. She was reminding me that love didn't have to be earned by obligation. It could be freely given. Our time together became the brightest part of my days. On Friday evenings, she'd bring popcorn and old DVDs from her collection. We'd watch movies in the lounge, sometimes joined by Callie, sometimes just the two of us. We laughed at silly comedies and cried at bittersweet dramas. I began to look forward to those nights the way children look forward to Christmas morning. On Sundays, she'd bring books and read aloud to me. Her voice was soothing, melodic, carrying me into other worlds. Sometimes she chose novels, other times poetry. My favorite was when she read from her own journal small thoughts she had scribbled down about her day, her hopes, her fears. She trusted me with pieces of herself, and I cherished that trust more than she knew. One evening, after she finished reading, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You know, Ellie, I feel like I've missed out on having a mother all my life. And somehow, sitting here with you, it feels like I've found her." Her words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I reached over, touched her cheek, and whispered, "And you've given me the daughter I always dreamed of having." From then on, she started calling me Mama Ellie. At first, it made me cry, but soon it became a source of joy. Every time she said it, I felt like the broken pieces of my heart were being mended. The nurses noticed the change in me. Sarah, who had always been kind, smiled one afternoon as she helped me adjust my blanket. "You've been glowing lately, Eliana. That young woman of yours, she's doing wonders for you." I smiled, because she was right. Tessa wasn't just visiting me, she was giving me life again. Callie, too, became more present. She would come with Tessa on weekends, bringing her playful energy into the nursing home. The three of us formed a kind of rhythm, laughing over board games, sharing meals, even decorating my room with twinkling fairy lights one evening. For the first time since moving into the facility, my room felt like home. On my birthday, they surprised me with a small party. Tessa brought cupcakes, Callie brought balloons, and together they sang to me with such joy that I couldn't stop the tears streaming down my face. The other residents clapped along, and for that moment, I wasn't a forgotten woman in a nursing home. I was loved. But beneath all that happiness, fear still lingered. Every time my phone rang and I saw Lucas's name, my chest tightened. I knew he resented Tessa, and I worried what would happen if he discovered the truth about the will. Still, I couldn't bring myself to push her away. I had already lost one family member. I wasn't going to lose another, not one who chose me so wholeheartedly. One quiet evening, as Tessa and I sat in the courtyard watching the sunset, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. I've always wondered what it would feel like to belong somewhere, to feel like I had roots, and somehow, you've given me that. Isn't it strange how life works? How people can find each other when they need it most? I looked at her, my chest swelling with emotion. It's not strange, I said softly. It's grace. Life doesn't always give us what we expect, but sometimes it gives us exactly what we need. In my journal that night, I wrote, I no longer pray for Lucas to love me the way he once did. I pray for the strength to accept the love that is here, in front of me, freely given. As the weeks passed, my fear of Lucas began to fade into the background, replaced by the joy of my new chosen family. Tessa and Callie didn't just visit, they included me in their lives. They showed me pictures of their vacations, introduced me to their friends when they stopped by, even asked my advice on things like recipes and relationships. They made me feel needed again, like my wisdom and experience mattered. One afternoon, Tessa came in with a tear-streaked face. She had just gone through a terrible argument with a close friend and didn't know how to handle it. She collapsed into the chair beside me and said, I just needed my Mama Ellie today. I held her hand, stroked her hair, and whispered the same words I had once told Lucas as a child. You're safe. You're loved. In that moment, I realized something profound. I had been given a second chance at motherhood. Not in the way I had imagined, but in a way that healed the deepest cracks in my soul. And yet, I couldn't shake the shadow of Lucas's anger. The memory of his eyes narrowing at Tessa, of his cold words about blood and family, it haunted me. I knew him well enough to recognize that he wasn't going to let things go. He was too prideful, too entitled, too convinced of what he thought was his by right. I wanted to protect this fragile, beautiful bond I had found with Tessa and Callie. But I also knew that when Lucas discovered the truth, that he was no longer in my will, that everything would go to the girl he despised, it would ignite a fire I wasn't sure I was ready to face. For now, though, I let myself live in the joy of the present. I chose to hold on to the laughter, the warmth, the love that had blossomed so unexpectedly in my life. But peace never lasts when greed is lurking in the shadows. The day Lucas learned about the will was the day everything exploded. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, one of those days that began so peacefully I never could have guessed it would end in chaos. I had just finished a craft session with some of the other residents when I was called into Mr. Gallagher's office for a routine follow-up about the paperwork. I thought nothing of it, but Lucas must have been watching me more closely than I realized. I didn't see him until later that week, when he appeared at the nursing home unannounced. His demeanor was different, tense, sharp, eyes blazing with something more than suspicion. He didn't waste time on greetings. He walked straight up to me in the lounge and said, So it's true, isn't it? You changed your will. My heart dropped into my stomach. What are you talking about? I asked, though the tremor in my voice gave me away. He leaned closer, his voice low but venomous. I heard you talking with that lawyer of yours. You think I wouldn't find out? You think you can just hand everything over to her? I froze. Lucas, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, he snapped. You're giving everything to that girl, that stranger, that what is she to you, huh? Some replacement? Some charity project? His voice had risen now, drawing the attention of the other residents and staff. My face flushed with shame, but more than that, I felt fear. The son I once knew, the boy who had clung to me in the dark after nightmares, was gone. In his place was a man consumed by greed and resentment. I tried to speak calmly. Lucas, this isn't about replacing you. It's about recognizing who's been here for me. Who's cared for me when I needed it most. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. So all the years I was your son, all the sacrifices I made to get where I am, they don't mean anything? You'd rather give everything to some woman who swooped in out of nowhere? Tears burned my eyes, but I held his gaze. Lucas, I gave you my entire life. And when I needed you, you weren't there. You abandoned me. His face twisted with anger. I didn't abandon you. I'm busy. I have a life. You expect me to sit here every day like I don't have things to do? No, I whispered. I expected you to love me enough to show up sometimes. That's all I wanted. Just you. For a moment, silence fell between us. Then he sneered. You know what? You've been manipulated. That's what this island she's using you, Mom. She's playing the victim, making herself look like some saint so you'll give her everything. You're too blind to see it. My hands shook, but I steadied my voice. No, Lucas. You're the one who doesn't see. She hasn't asked me for a single thing. Not once. She's given me her time, her love, her loyalty, and all without expecting anything in return. Can you say the same? The truth of my words hung in the air. But Lucas refused to hear them. His face reddened, his fists clenched at his sides. This is betrayal. Do you hear me? Betrayal. You're my mother. I'm your son. I'm supposed to be the one you leave everything to. Supposed to be? I repeated, my voice trembling. No, Lucas. Inheritance is not a right. It's not owed to you just because we share blood. It's a gift, one earned by love and loyalty. And you've given me neither. His eyes widened in shock, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by raw fury. He leaned down until his face was inches from mine. You'll regret this, he spat. I'll fight this. I'll make sure she doesn't get a cent. Then he stormed out, slamming the doors so hard the walls shook. The lounge fell silent. Residents stared, nurses exchanged worried glances, and I sat frozen in my chair, trembling from head to toe. My chest felt heavy, as though the weight of decades of motherhood had come crashing down in that single moment. A soft hand touched my shoulder. It was Tessa. She had walked in during the chaos, and now her eyes were wide with concern. Ellie, what just happened? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. He knows. He found out about the will. Her face paled. Oh no. He thinks you manipulated me, I whispered, my voice cracking. He thinks I betrayed him. Tessa knelt in front of me, her eyes fierce despite the tears brimming in them. You didn't betray anyone. He betrayed you, Ellie. By walking away. By making you feel like you didn't matter. This is on him, not you. I wanted to believe her. But all I felt in that moment was devastation. The final thread that tied me to the son I once knew had snapped, and I wasn't sure it could ever be mended. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying his words, his anger, his accusations. I wrote in my journal, he called me a traitor, my own son. But what kind of son sees his mother as nothing more than a bank account waiting to be opened? What kind of love is that? If this is betrayal, then it is betrayal born of survival, choosing the ones who truly care over the one who turned his back. I knew one thing for certain. Lucas wasn't going to let this go. His pride wouldn't allow it. And the battle that was coming would test me in ways I had never imagined. But Lucas's fight for control was only just beginning. Lucas's desperation turned into a ruthless legal battle. I had thought his threats were empty, the angry outbursts of a son who couldn't accept the truth. But Lucas wasn't bluffing. Within weeks of that explosive confrontation in the lounge, I received notice. My own son was contesting my will. I sat in Mr. Gallagher's office, my hands trembling as I held the papers. He's really doing this? Mr. Gallagher nodded gravely. Yes, he's claiming undue influence that you weren't of sound mind, and that Miss Tessa manipulated you into changing your estate. The words cut deep. My own flesh and blood was standing in a courtroom, telling the world that I was weak, incapable, and easily controlled. Worse, he was dragging Tessa into the mud, accusing her of using me for financial gain. Tessa was furious when she found out. How dare he? She cried, pacing my room. I never asked for a dime. I never even knew about the will until now. He's twisting everything just to make himself look like the victim. I reached for her hand, my voice trembling. I know, but we'll have to prove it. The first day of court was surreal. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt like I was living someone else's life. Lucas sat across from me, his jaw tight, his suit perfectly pressed. He didn't look at me not once. It was as if I was already dead to him. His lawyer painted a picture of me as a lonely, vulnerable woman, manipulated by a young stranger who preyed on my weakness. They made Tessa sound like a thief in disguise, a schemer who had wormed her way into my heart to steal what was rightfully his. Every word was like a dagger. When it was our turn, Mr. Gallagher stood tall and spoke with calm conviction. The truth is simple, Mrs. Reyes, he always called me formally in court, made her decision freely and soundly. She chose to leave her estate to the person who has been there for her, not the one who abandoned her. That is, not manipulation. That is clarity. Then came the hardest part, testimony. I took the stand, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the whole room could hear it. The opposing lawyer leaned in, his voice slick with false sympathy. Mrs. Reyes, would you say you've been lonely these past few years? I swallowed hard. Yes. And would you say you've longed for companionship? That you might have been vulnerable to anyone who offered it? Tessa stiffened in her seat. I looked him square in the eye. Lonely? Yes. Vulnerable? I know the difference between love and manipulation. Tessa didn't ask for anything from me, she gave without expectation. That's why I made the decision I did. Not because she asked me to, but because she showed me what family truly means. The courtroom was silent. For the first time in years, I felt my voice carry strength. Then Tessa took the stand. She spoke with trembling honesty, admitting she had no idea I had even changed my will until Lucas revealed it. She told the court about her own mother's death, about the hole it left in her heart, and how our bond had filled that space. I never wanted her money, Tessa said firmly, her voice cracking. All I wanted was her. The judge listened carefully, his expression unreadable. Lucas was called next. He played his part well, looking wounded, betrayed. He spoke about how much he had sacrificed for his career, how he couldn't be at the nursing home every day but still loved me deeply. He accused Tessa of brainwashing me, of turning me against him. But when Mr. Gallagher cross-examined him, the cracks showed. Mr. Reyes, Gallagher said smoothly. How often did you visit your mother in the past year? Lucas shifted uncomfortably. I was busy. I had school, work, so, less than 5 times? Yes. And in those visits, would you say you spent more time asking about her health and happiness, or about her financial situation? Lucas's face turned red. That's not fair. Just answer the question. He faltered, stammering. I asked about both. The truth was plain for everyone to see. Days dragged into weeks, but eventually, the trial came to its close. The judge delivered his decision with a firm, unwavering voice. The court finds no evidence of undue influence. Mrs. Reyes acted of her own free will, with full clarity of mind. The will stands as written. Relief washed over me. But it was laced with sorrow. I glanced at Lucas, hoping for even a flicker of remorse, a softening, anything. But his face was a mask of fury. He didn't look at me. He just stormed out of the courtroom, his lawyer trailing behind him. I sat back, exhausted, my body trembling with the weight of it all. Tessa rushed to my side, tears streaming down her face. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "We did it, Mama Ellie. It's over." But even as I clung to her, a cold fear settled in my gut. Lucas wasn't done. I knew him well enough to see it in his eyes. The law had failed him. But his pride, his greed, his anger, they weren't finished. That night, back in my room, I wrote in my journal. The judge ruled in my favor, but my heart is heavy. Victory feels hollow when it means losing your child. And yet, I cannot regret my choice. Love is not measured in bloodlines, it is measured in actions, and today, my actions stood against his greed. Still, I fear this is not the end. But little did I know, His next move would go beyond the law. Lucas's rage reached a dangerous level after the court case. When the judge's gavel fell, I thought the battle was over. The law had spoken, the will stood firm, and my decision had been protected. But victory in court did not bring peace. It only deepened Lucas's fury. At first, it was phone calls. Angry, venomous voicemails left in the middle of the night. "You'll regret this, Mom," one message hissed. "You think you can just cut me out? You think she cares about you more than I do? She's using you. And when she's done, you'll have nothing. And I won't be there." Another time, "I'm your son, not her. Me. You owe me." Each voicemail was worse than the last, dripping with bitterness, entitlement, and rage. I stopped answering his calls altogether. But that didn't stop him. Then came the visits. He would show up at the nursing home unannounced, demanding to see me. The staff tried to protect me, but he was my legal next of kin, and technically had the right to visit. He would sit in my room, glaring, pacing, accusing. "You're letting them poison your mind," he spat one afternoon. "Do you even realize what you've done to me, to us? You've destroyed this family." Tears welled in my eyes, but I held my ground. "Lucas, you destroyed it when you walked away." His face twisted with rage. He slammed his fist onto the table, making me flinch. The nurse rushed in, but he brushed her off and stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. The staff began to worry about my safety. One night, Sarah came into my room after her shift and sat on the edge of my bed. "Eliana, I don't mean to scare you, but I think you should consider a restraining order. The way he's behaving, it isn't normal. It's dangerous." Dangerous? The word echoed in my mind. This was my son. My only child. How could I think of him as dangerous? And yet, the pit in my stomach told me Sarah was right. Tessa became increasingly protective. She started scheduling her visits around the times Lucas was likely to appear, staying late when she thought he might show up. One evening, she found me trembling after another confrontation and held me tightly in her arms. "He can't keep doing this to you," she whispered fiercely. "You deserve peace. If he can't give that to you, then we'll find a way to make him stop." But Lucas wasn't slowing down. He was spiraling. Staff began reporting sightings of him in the parking lot at odd hours, lurking near the entrance. Some nights, I would hear footsteps outside my window and my heart would pound in terror, imagining him standing there in the dark, watching. The final straw came one stormy night. The rain lashed against the windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. I had just drifted off to sleep when a loud pounding jolted me awake. My window rattled violently. Heart racing, I pulled back the curtain and there he was. Lucas. His face illuminated by the flash of lightning, twisted in anger. His fist pounding against the glass. "Open the door! Talk to me, don't you dare shut me out again!" I screamed, pressing the call button for the nurse. Within moments, security rushed in, pulling me away from the window as they confronted him outside. He shouted obscenities, his voice carrying through the storm, before they finally forced him to leave the property. I collapsed onto my bed, shaking uncontrollably. Never in my life had I felt such fear, not from strangers, not from accidents, not even from my own frailty, but from my son. The boy I had raised. The boy I had loved more than life itself. That night, I cried in Tessa's arms as she sat beside me. She held me until my sobs quieted, her hand stroking my hair. "He's not the boy you raised anymore," she whispered. "He's someone else now, someone blinded by greed and anger, and you can't let him destroy you." I wanted to believe she was wrong. I wanted to believe that deep down, somewhere inside him, the little boy I once knew was still there. But every encounter proved otherwise. The sweet child who had once clung to me, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mom," was gone. In his place was a stranger I no longer recognized. The next morning, I filed for a restraining order. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself and to protect Tessa, who had become his target by proxy. As I signed the paperwork, my hands shook. Not from weakness, but from grief. Because with every stroke of the pen, I was acknowledging a terrible truth. My son was no longer my protector, my family, my legacy. He was my enemy. That night, in my journal, I wrote, I gave him life. I gave him everything. And now, I must protect myself from him. The bond between mother and child is supposed to be unbreakable. But tonight, I feel the weight of its shattering. I feel the breaking point. And deep in my bones, I knew. The final confrontation between us was no longer a matter of if, but when. And I knew the final confrontation was inevitable. It all came to a head on a stormy night. The restraining order had been approved. For a few weeks, things were quiet. Too quiet. I began to believe maybe, just maybe, Lucas had finally accepted the court's decision and was retreating from his anger. But deep down, I knew better. Lucas had never been one to let go. When he wanted something, he latched on with a grip so tight it became destructive. And I had taken from him what he believed was rightfully his. The storm rolled in on a Friday night. The rain pelted the windows, thunder roared overhead, and flashes of lightning cast eerie shadows across the nursing home walls. I was sitting in my room with Tessa, sipping tea, when the power flickered. We laughed nervously, trying to lighten the tension. But my heart was already uneasy. Then came the pounding. The front doors shook under violent fists. Voices shouted in the hall. My blood ran cold. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Lucas, I whispered. My cup slipping from my hands, shattering on the floor. The staff rushed toward the entrance, but he forced his way inside. His hair was soaked from the storm, his eyes wild, his clothes clinging to him. He looked less like my son and more like a man possessed. "Mom!" he shouted down the hall. "We're not done. Not until you fix this." Tessa stood up, blocking the doorway to my room. "Stay here," she told me firmly. "Don't move." But Lucas was already storming down the corridor, his footsteps heavy, his anger radiating off him like heat. When he saw Tessa in the doorway, his face twisted with pure hatred. "You," he spat. "This is your fault. You poisoned her against me." Tessa stood her ground, her voice shaking but strong. "I never asked her for anything, Lucas. She made her own choice." He laughed bitterly, stepping closer. "Don't play innocent. You saw an opportunity and you took it. You stole my mother from me. You stole everything from me." I forced myself to my feet, gripping my cane for support. My voice was weak but urgent. "Lucas, stop this. Please, look at yourself." He turned to me then, his expression twisting between pain and rage. "I'm looking at the woman who raised me, the woman who promised she'd always be there for me, and now she's handing my life away to a stranger." My tears blurred my vision. "Lucas, I didn't take anything from you. You walked away from me long before I made that choice." He shook his head violently. No, you don't get it. You're mine. Everything you have, everything you are, it should come to me. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to be." His voice rose to a shout, echoing down the hall. Nurses huddled nearby, too frightened to intervene. Tessa spread her arms, shielding me with her body. "You don't own her, Lucas. She's not your possession. She's your mother. And you've treated her like she's nothing more than a check waiting to be cashed." Lucas lunged toward her, his hands outstretched as if he meant to shove her aside. I cried out, my cane slipping from my grasp. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice breaking. "Don't you dare touch her." For a moment, the storm outside seemed to pause. The room grew still. All eyes on me. I straightened my back, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. "Lucas, I gave you everything. Every ounce of my love, every dollar I earned, every dream I sacrificed, it was for you. And when I needed you most, you abandoned me. You turned your back on me, and now you dare to call me a traitor?" His face contorted with emotion, but I didn't let him interrupt. "You're not losing everything because of Tessa. You're losing everything because of you. Because you cared more about money than love, more about greed than loyalty. Family isn't about blood, it's about showing up. And she did. You didn't. Silence fell over the hallway. Lucas's chest heaved as he glared at me, his fists trembling at his sides. For a second, I thought he might strike the wall, or worse. But then the sound of sirens pierced the storm. The police burst through the entrance, called by the staff who had wisely dialed 911 the moment he forced his way inside. 2 officers grabbed Lucas by the arms, restraining him as he fought to break free. "Let me go," he roared. "She's my mother. She owes me." I sank into my chair, sobbing uncontrollably as Tessa wrapped her arms around me. The officers dragged Lucas away, his voice fading into the distance as the storm outside raged on. When the doors finally slammed shut behind him, the silence that followed was deafening. I buried my face in Tessa's shoulder, my body trembling from the confrontation I had dreaded for so long. "It's over," Tessa whispered, rocking me gently. "He can't hurt you anymore." But even as I clung to her, I knew a deeper truth. Lucas might be gone from that building, but the wound he left inside me would never truly heal. He had shown me the darkest side of himself, and it was a sight I could never unsee. Later that night, as I lay in bed, listening to the rain finally calm, I opened my journal one last time. My hand shook as I wrote. I faced my son tonight, not as a signed mother, but as a woman who refused to be broken. I chose love over fear. And though the storm raged outside, inside me there was a strange, quiet peace. And as the sirens faded, I finally understood what family truly meant. With Lucas out of my life, I was finally free to start over emotionally. The night of the confrontation left me shaken to my core. For days, my body felt heavy, my chest tight with the aftershocks of fear. I replayed the storm, his shouts, the way his eyes burned with hatred. It was like a wound that refused to close. But something remarkable happened too. For the first time in years, I no longer lived in the limbo of waiting for Lucas to visit, waiting for him to love me again, waiting for his absence to stop hurting. The truth was laid bare. He had shown me who he was, and I had finally let go of the illusion of who I wanted him to be. The court issued an extension on the restraining order. Lucas was barred from contacting me directly, and the staff at the nursing home were instructed not to let him inside. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without jolting awake at every sound in the hallway. The constant tension in my shoulders began to ease. Tessa and Callie became my safety net. They visited even more often now, not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. They decorated my room with cheerful colors, hung up photos of our little family, and made sure I never felt alone. One afternoon, Callie brought in a box of craft supplies. "We're making a memory wall," she announced. "Every time we share a special moment, we'll add something here to remember it by." Together, we pinned up photographs, pressed flowers from the courtyard, and little notes we had written to each other. My favorite was a simple card from Tessa that said, "You matter more than you know." The memory wall grew each week, and so did my sense of belonging. I began to thrive in small but meaningful ways. I joined group activities again, something I had avoided for so long. I played cards with other residents, laughed during exercise classes, even shared stories during community dinners. The staff often said, "You're glowing again, Eliana." And I was. Because I wasn't living in the shadow of neglect anymore, I was basking in the light of love freely given. Holidays were no longer dreaded. On Thanksgiving, Tessa and Callie brought me to their apartment, where we cooked a small feast together. They insisted I sit at the head of the table. "You're the heart of this family," Callie said, raising her glass. Tears filled my eyes as we clinked glasses, laughter filling the room. Christmas was even more special. They surprised me with a necklace engraved with the words "Chosen Family." When I opened the box, my hands shook. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. Tessa leaned in, her eyes shining. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that we love you. We're in this together." I hugged them both tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude. For the first time in years, The holiday season didn't feel like a reminder of what I had lost. It felt like a celebration of what I had found. But there were quiet moments too. Moments when I sat by myself and thought of Lucas. Despite everything, a part of me still longed for the boy he used to be, the child who clung to me, who whispered secrets under the covers, who once made me feel like the most important person in the world. I grieved for him, not the man he had become, but the child I had lost long before. In those moments, Tessa always seemed to know. She would sit beside me silently, holding my hand, never pushing me to speak. Her presence was enough. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset from the courtyard, I said quietly, "I never imagined my life would end up like this." Tessa tilted her head. "Like what?" "Finding love in unexpected places, losing my son but gaining daughters." She smiled softly. "Life has a funny way of surprising us. Sometimes it takes away what we thought we needed, only to give us what we truly do." Her words stayed with me. Over time, I began to see my life not as a tragedy, but as a second chance. I wasn't defined by Lucas's neglect anymore. I was defined by the love I had found, the family I had chosen, and the peace I had created for myself. The residents often teased me, calling me the lucky one because I had visitors who came so often. I'd smile and nod, because in many ways, I was lucky. But I knew it wasn't luck, it was grace. Grace that brought Tessa and Callie into my life when I was at my lowest. Grace that reminded me love isn't about blood, it's about choice. One afternoon, Tessa surprised me with an idea. "We've been thinking, what if we take you on little trips? Just short ones. A museum, the lakefront. Even a picnic at the park. You deserve to see more than these four walls." I felt like a child again, excited by the thought. "Do you think that's possible?" She grinned. "Anything's possible, Mama Ellie." And so we did. The nursing home approved supervised outings, and together we began making new memories. We visited the art museum, where I stood in awe of paintings I hadn't seen since my youth. We had picnics in the park, lying on blankets, laughing as the wind tugged at our hair. We sat by the lakefront, watching the waves crash against the shore, holding hands in the cool breeze. Every outing felt like a reclaiming of life. A reminder that even in my 40s, even in a nursing home, I wasn't done living yet. In my journal, I wrote, "Peace is not the absence of loss. Peace is finding love again, even after the deepest wounds. Peace is looking at what remains, instead of what was taken." And though Lucas remained a shadow on the edge of my heart, I refused to let that shadow dim the light of what I had now. But there was still one final step to seal the bond we had created. The day I signed my final papers was the day I embraced my true family. I had lived with the weight of decisions for months, decisions about my son, about my heart, about the meaning of family itself. But now, as the end of my journey drew closer, I knew it was time to ensure my legacy reflected not the pain I endured, but the love I found. Mr. Gallagher, my lawyer, visited the nursing home one last time. His briefcase clicked open on the small table in my room, papers spread neatly before me. "Eliana," he said gently, "this is the final step. Once you sign these, everything is settled." I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I held the pen. Not from uncertainty, but from the gravity of it all. For so long, I had equated legacy with bloodline, passing down my life's work, my savings, my possessions to the son I had raised. But Lucas had already made it clear that my worth, to him, was measured only in material things. So I had chosen differently. I had chosen love. With each stroke of my pen, I placed my trust, my heart, my memory into the hands of the people who had stood by me when I was most fragile. My home, my jewelry, my savings, everything I had built was now entrusted to Tessa. A smaller portion I set aside for Callie, knowing she too had become family to me. But beyond the documents, I wanted them to have something deeper. So I wrote letters that would be given after I was gone. To Lucas, I wrote with trembling hands, "My son, I love you. I always have, and I always will. But love is not blind. I cannot reward neglect with inheritance. My decision was not about money, it was about truth. You left me when I needed you most, and though my heart aches for the child I once knew, I cannot pretend the man you became has honored me. This is not punishment, it is honesty. My hope is that one day you will understand. To Tessa, I poured my heart into every line. My daughter by choice, my gift, from life's cruelest storm. You gave me more than companionship, you gave me dignity, laughter, and love when I had nothing left. You reminded me that I was worth showing up for. This inheritance is not a prize. It is my way of saying thank you, my way of ensuring that a piece of me lives on in the life you continue to build. Promise me you will keep choosing love, as you chose me. And to Callie, you brought joy and laughter back into my days. You reminded me how sweet life can be when it is shared with people who care. This gift is small compared to what you gave me, a sense of belonging. Carry it forward, and never forget that family can be found in the most unexpected places. By the time I finished writing, my tears had soaked the page. But they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of peace. When Mr. Gallagher collected the documents and letters, he gave me a reassuring nod. You've done something very brave, Eliana. You've written your truth. After he left, Tessa came into my room, smiling as she carried a tray of tea. What was that about? She asked, setting it down carefully. I hesitated, then smiled softly. Just making sure everything is in order. She tilted her head, sensing more than I said. But she didn't press. That was one of the things I loved most about her. She gave me space when I needed it, but was always close enough to lean on. The days that followed were some of the happiest of my life. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they were filled with simple moments of love. We cooked together in the small facility kitchen, laughing as Callie tried, and failed, to follow my mother's old recipe for tamales. We took walks in the courtyard, watching the flowers bloom. We shared late-night talks, stories of our pasts, dreams for the future. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something or someone. I was simply living. And as I reflected on everything, I realized the greatest legacy I could leave behind wasn't the money, or the house, or the jewelry. It was the lesson written in the story of my life. That family is not defined by blood, but by love. That loyalty is more valuable than inheritance. That showing up is worth more than any material gift. On one particularly beautiful afternoon, I sat with Tessa and Callie in the courtyard. The sun warmed our faces, birds chirped overhead, and laughter filled the air. I looked at them and whispered, "You know, I used to think my story was one of abandonment. But now I see it was always meant to be one of rediscovery. I didn't lose a son, I gained daughters." Tessa reached over and squeezed my hand. "And we gained you, Mama Ellie." Callie leaned against my shoulder, grinning. Forever. That night, I opened my journal one last time. My hand moved slowly across the page, but my words were steady. Today, I felt complete. I am not leaving behind bitterness. I am leaving behind love. My son may never understand, but my daughters will carry my heart with them. And that is enough. That is everything. When I closed the journal, I smiled. Because for the first time in so long, my story didn't feel unfinished. It felt whole. And as I closed that chapter of my life, I knew I had given everything to the one person who truly deserved it.